I still remember the weight of that guitar in my hands, how foreign it felt, how impossible the whole thing seemed. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late September, and the music room smelled like old wood and rosendust. I'd signed up for lessons on a whim, one of those desperate attempts to become someone different, someone more interesting than the guy who spent his evenings alone with spreadsheets and takeout containers. Marcus was my instructor's name. When I walked in, he was tuning a beautiful mahogany acoustic, his fingers moving across the strings with this casual confidence that made my stomach tighten. He looked up and smiled, and I immediately felt like an imposter. He was maybe 5 years older than me, with these warm brown eyes and calloused fingertips that spoke of years of practice I'd never have. "You must be Daniel," he said, setting his guitar aside. "First time picking up an instrument?" "Is it that obvious?" I asked, trying to laugh, but it came out nervous and thin. "Everyone starts somewhere," he said, and there was something in his voice that made me believe him. "Here, let's get you set up." He handed me a guitar, a smaller one than his, and guided me to a chair. I held it awkwardly, like a child holding a baby for the first time, terrified of dropping it or doing something catastrophically wrong. Marcus sat across from me, demonstrating how to position it, where my arm should rest, how to curve my hand around the neck. I tried to mirror him, but my body felt stiff and uncooperative. "You're too tense," he said gently. "Here, let me help." And then he stood up and moved behind me. I felt the air shift as he approached, felt the warmth of him before he even touched the guitar. My heart started doing this stupid thing where it beat too fast, too loud. I told myself it was just nerves about the lesson, about being bad at something new. "This okay?" he asked, his voice close to my ear now. "Yeah," I managed, though my mouth had gone dry. His hands came around me, one adjusting my left hand on the neck, the other guiding my right arm to the proper position over the strings. He was close enough that I could smell his cologne, something woody and clean, could feel the solid presence of him against my back. My brain went fuzzy and hyper-aware all at once. "It's the only way to really show you right," he said, and I felt his breath against my neck. "You can't learn guitar from a distance. You have to feel it." He positioned my fingers on the frets, pressing them down in the right spots, and I tried to focus on that, on the bite of the strings against my soft fingertips, on anything other than how close he was, how my whole body had become one exposed nerve. "Now strum," he said, his hand guiding mine across the strings. The sound that came out was actually a chord, clear and resonant, and I felt this ridiculous surge of pride mixed with something else, something warmer and more dangerous. "There you go," Marcus said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "That's a G chord. You just played your first chord, Daniel." He stepped back after that, and I immediately felt cold where he'd been warm, felt the absence of him like a physical thing. We spent the rest of that first lesson with him, sitting across from me again, showing me hand positions, teaching me the names of strings, and I tried to focus. I really did. But my mind kept drifting back to those few minutes when he'd been behind me, when the whole world had narrowed down to the point where his chest had almost touched my back. I went home that night and couldn't stop thinking about it. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my fingertips sore from the strings, and told myself I was being ridiculous. He was just teaching me guitar. That's what instructors do. They adjust your position. They show you physically how things work. There was nothing more to it. But I signed up for another lesson the next week, and another after that. It became a pattern. Marcus would sit across from me for most of the lesson, patient and encouraging, as I fumbled through scales and simple songs. But there would always come a moment when I couldn't quite get something right, when my fingers wouldn't cooperate or my strumming pattern fell apart, and he'd say, "Here, let me show you," and move behind me again. Every single time my body would react the same way. that spike of adrenaline, that hyper-awareness, that feeling like I was standing on the edge of something I didn't understand. His hands would cover mine, gentle but firm, guiding my fingers to the right positions. He'd lean in close, his chin sometimes almost resting on my shoulder, as he watched my hands, and I'd forget how to breathe properly. "You're getting better," he'd say, and I'd feel the vibration of his voice through my back. "I can feel you relaxing into it." Relaxing, that was a joke. I was the opposite of relaxed, but maybe that's what I felt like to him, because I'd stopped tensing up quite so obviously, stopped flinching when he got close. My body had started to expect it, even anticipate it. By the 5th lesson, I was practicing at home every night, my fingers flying over the strings in my tiny apartment, desperate to improve, to impress him. I told myself it was about the music, about finally being good at something creative. But late at night, when I was honest with myself, I knew I was practicing so hard because I wanted to see that look of pride in Marcus's eyes, wanted to hear him say I was doing well, wanted to give him reasons to keep touching me. That thought terrified me. I'd never been good at examining my own feelings, never wanted to look too closely at certain things. I'd had girlfriends in college, relationships that fizzled out because I could never quite connect the way I was supposed to. I'd told myself I was just busy, just focused on my career, just not ready. But sitting in that music room every Tuesday with Marcus behind me, his hands on mine, his breath on my neck, I couldn't hide from it anymore. One evening, after a particularly good lesson where I'd finally nailed a chord progression I'd been struggling with for weeks, Marcus invited me to stay after. "I want to play something for you," he said, "if you have time." I had time. I would have canceled anything to have more time. He picked up his guitar and started playing, and it was beautiful, this intricate finger-picking pattern that sounded like water flowing over stones, like wind through trees, like all the things I couldn't say out loud. I watched his hands move, watched his face as he played, the way his eyes closed and his whole body swayed slightly with the music. He was completely unself-conscious, completely in the moment, and I felt something crack open in my chest. When he finished, the last note hanging in the air between us, he looked at me and said, "That's what I want you to be able to do someday. Not just play the notes, but feel them. Let them move through you." "I don't know if I'll ever be that good," I said quietly. "You will," he said with such certainty that I almost believed him. "You've got something, Daniel. I can see it in how hard you practice, how much you care. You just need to let yourself be vulnerable with it. Stop being so afraid of making mistakes." The word vulnerable hung in the air. I felt seen in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Is that what I'm doing?" I asked. "Being afraid?" "Isn't everyone?" Marcus said, and there was something in his eyes now, something that made my heart race. Being afraid of being seen, of showing people who we really are. It's easier to keep everything locked up tight, play it safe. We were sitting close now, closer than we needed to be, in the empty room. I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could count his eyelashes if I wanted to. "Marcus," I started, not knowing where I was going with it, just knowing I needed to say something, needed to acknowledge this thing that was growing between us, this thing that felt too big to ignore anymore. "Yeah," he said softly, "but I lost my nerve." "Thank you," I said instead, "for being patient with me, for teaching me." Something flickered across his face, disappointment maybe, or understanding. "Of course," he said, leaning back slightly, "that's what I'm here for." The next lesson, there was a tension in the room that hadn't been there before. Marcus seemed more careful, more distant. He sat across from me the entire time, demonstrating techniques but not touching me, not moving behind me even when I struggled. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt abandoned. "You're doing great on your own," he said when I looked at him questioningly after fumbling through a transition. "You don't need me hovering anymore." But I did need it. I needed him close. I needed to stop pretending I didn't. Halfway through the lesson, I stopped playing and set the guitar down. My hands were shaking. "Marcus," I said, "why did you stop?" "Stop what?" "Sitting behind me, showing me the way you used to." He was quiet for a long moment, and I watched emotions play across his face, watched him choose his words carefully. "I thought maybe it was making you uncomfortable," he finally said. "I thought maybe I was crossing a line." "What if you weren't?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if I didn't want you to stop?" The air between us felt electric now, charged with everything we weren't saying. Marcus stood up slowly, and I thought maybe he was going to leave, going to tell me this was inappropriate, that I'd misread everything. Instead, he walked over to where I sat and stopped right in front of me. "Daniel," he said, and my name in his mouth sounded like a question, like a prayer. "I need you to be clear with me. What are we talking about here?" I stood up too, the guitar between us like a barrier. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never been good at this, at knowing what I want or being brave enough to say it, but I know that every week I count down the days until Tuesday. I know that when you're close to me, when you're teaching me, I feel more alive than I have in years. I know that I practice for hours every night, hoping I'll impress you, hoping you'll smile at me the way you do when I finally get something right." "And what does that mean?" he asked gently. "It means I think I've been lying to myself for a long time," I said, "about who I am, about what I want. And being here with you, it's made me realize I can't lie anymore. It's exhausting and lonely." Marcus reached out and took the guitar from my hands, setting it carefully aside. Then he stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of him again, that familiar warmth that had been haunting my dreams. "I started sitting behind you because it's genuinely the best way to teach certain techniques," he said. "But I kept doing it because I couldn't help myself, because having an excuse to be close to you, to touch you, even in that small way, was the best part of my week." My breath caught in my throat. "Really?" "Really," he said. "But you're my student, and I didn't want to make you uncomfortable. I didn't want to assume anything or put you in a position where you felt pressured." "I don't feel pressured," I said. "I feel terrified and exhilarated and like I'm finally being honest about something I've been hiding from for years." "What have you been hiding from?" he asked, though I think he knew. "That I've never felt this way about any of the women I dated," I said. "That I've been going through the motions my whole adult life, doing what I thought I was supposed to do, being who I thought I was supposed to be. That it took a guitar instructor sitting behind me, his hands on mine, to make me realize I've been sleepwalking through my own life." Marcus lifted his hand slowly, giving me time to pull away, and cupped my face. His palm was warm, those calluses rough against my skin, and I leaned into the touch like a man who'd been lost in the desert finding water. "You're not sleepwalking now," he said. "No," I agreed, "I'm not." He kissed me then, soft and careful, a question more than a statement. I kissed him back, my hands finding his shoulders, pulling him closer. It felt like coming home, like the missing piece I'd been searching for without knowing I was searching. It felt right in a way nothing ever had before. When we broke apart, I was breathing hard, my heart hammering against my ribs. Marcus rested his forehead against mine, and we stood there in the quiet music room, holding each other as the late afternoon light slanted through the windows. "So," he said eventually, a smile in his voice, "does this mean you want to keep taking lessons?" I laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. "Yeah," I said, "but maybe not just guitar lessons." "What else did you have in mind?" "Lessons in being brave," I said, "in being honest, in letting myself want things without apologizing for it, Think you can teach me that?" "I think we can teach each other," Marcus said, and kissed me again. That was 6 months ago. I still take lessons every Tuesday, and Marcus still sits behind me sometimes, his arms around me, his hands guiding mine. But now, when the lesson ends, we don't say goodbye. We go to dinner, or back to his place, or mine. We talk about music and life and all the years we both spent trying to be someone we weren't. I'm not great at guitar yet. I still fumble chords and lose the rhythm sometimes. But Marcus says I'm getting better at the important thing, at being vulnerable, at letting the music move through me without being afraid of what it might reveal. He says I'm learning to trust myself, to trust him, to trust that it's okay to want what I want and be who I am. Some nights when we're sitting together on his couch, my back against his chest, his guitar in my hands and his arms around me, showing me a new song, I think about that first lesson, how terrified I was, how certain I was that I'd never be able to do this, how small and lost I felt. And I'm grateful for all of it, for every awkward moment and nervous flutter and sleepless night, because it brought me here, to this place where I finally feel like myself. He was right that first day. You can't learn guitar from a distance. You have to feel it. And sometimes, if you're lucky, learning to feel the music teaches you how to feel everything else too, all the things you've been too scared to let yourself feel. Sometimes a guitar instructor who sits behind you and says, "It's the only way to show you right," is really teaching you something much more important than chord progressions and strumming patterns. Sometimes he's teaching you how to be brave enough to reach for what you want, how to be honest enough to admit what you need, how to be vulnerable enough to let someone in. I still remember the weight of that guitar in my hands, how impossible it all seemed. But now I know that the impossible things are often the ones most worth learning. And sometimes the best teachers are the ones who sit close enough to show you that you're stronger and braver than you ever thought you could be.